I'm Lauren Whitaker, 35 years old, and I still remember the way my sister clung to my hand when we were little, whispering, "Don't leave me," every time a storm rolled in. Years later, she would stand inches from my face in a helicopter, lean in close, and shove me out into the snow-covered sky. My husband watched it happen, arms crossed, face still, just like they planned. They thought I'd fall, disappear, and leave behind a $5 million payout and a company I built from nothing. But I didn't die. And 3 weeks later, I walked through the front doors of the funeral home where they were mourning me. Before I go any further, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from, and hit that like button if you've ever had to rebuild from the ashes someone else tried to leave you in. I grew up in Nebraska, just outside Lincoln. Our house sat at the end of a gravel road where the wind always seemed to carry dust and voices from a mile away. My mother ran a flower shop from the front porch, sunflowers, peonies, irises. She believed in keeping your word, treating people right, and showing up when it mattered most. My sister Madison and I shared a room with quilts that smelled like cedar and a closet full of hand-me-downs. We didn't have much, but we had each other. When I turned 16, I started saving, babysitting, grocery bagging, whatever I could find. I knew I wasn't staying in that town forever. I wanted something that was mine. By 24, I had put myself through community college, worked 2 jobs, and started a design studio with little more than a borrowed laptop and a rented corner office. That's where I met Rowan. He walked in one afternoon to pick up a corporate gift basket for a firm down the hall. Tall, polished, good at remembering names and saying the right things. I was still figuring out QuickBooks and how to make rent every month. He already had a downtown condo and a business degree, but he said he liked my grit. We got married 3 years later in a small garden behind my mother's shop. Madison stood beside me in a pale blue dress, hair pinned back, eyes glossy. She had just finished school in St. Louis and didn't say much that day, just smiled for the pictures and left early. Over time, I let Rowan help me grow the company. He brought in new investors, helped polish the pitch deck. We moved to Denver, upgraded our office, rebranded. I didn't notice how often he spoke for me in meetings, or how he and Madison started getting closer again. She'd visit often, sometimes staying over, saying she was between apartments. I chalked it up to family, to old bonds rekindling. I didn't ask too many questions. The trip to Aspen was Rowan's idea. "You've been working non-stop," he said. "Let's get away for the weekend." Madison came too, said she needed the fresh air. I didn't argue. I thought maybe this was the start of something better. I stood by the helicopter, snowflakes melting into my coat, trying to believe this was a new chapter, not the end of one. Rowan fastened the harness around my waist, his hands steady, his expression soft. "Happy anniversary," he said, brushing a kiss across my cheek. I nodded, pulling my jacket tighter against the wind coming off the ridge. The cold in Aspen had a way of finding the smallest seams, slipping past layers like it knew where to press. Madison stepped up beside us with that familiar smile of hers, red lipstick, perfect hair, not a strand out of place. She hugged me tight, told me I deserved this day. But her eyes flicked away too fast, like she had somewhere else she needed to be. The pilot gave us the thumbs up and the blades began to turn. I climbed in first, settling by the window. Rowan and Madison slid in beside me, their knees brushed. Their smiles were easy, practiced, but neither of them looked at me. I tried not to notice. The engine roared to life, a low, steady hum beneath our feet as the helicopter lifted off the ground and banked toward the tree line. I've always loved seeing the world from above. It makes everything seem manageable, like even the messiest parts of life can be smoothed out from the right height. Below us, the mountains were dusted in white, the rivers winding through them like silver ribbon. For a moment, I thought maybe we could still fix things. Maybe this trip could remind Rowan of where we started. Maybe Madison was just being Madison. I felt Rowan's hand brush mine on the seat. I looked at him and he smiled, polite, distant. Then Madison lifted her phone and turned toward us. "Smile for the family," she said brightly, her voice louder than it needed to be. I tried, I really did. But something in her tone made my stomach knot. She leaned in, adjusting the angle, her hair brushing my cheek. I didn't move. Too bright, I remember thinking. Too close. She lowered the phone, brought her lips near my ear. "You've always been in the way," she said, just loud enough for me to hear. I blinked, trying to understand, but then her hand was on my shoulder. I caught Rowan's face over her shoulder. Arms crossed, expression blank. He didn't speak. He didn't move. I felt the pressure before I realized what was happening. My back hit the open air. The wind tore the scream from my throat as I dropped. I saw Madison's face calm and smiling, the wind playing with the edges of her coat as she watched me fall. The sound of the rotor faded as the sky swallowed me whole. I don't remember hitting anything right away, just cold and wind and white. Then the trees came fast branches, snowbark all spinning upward as I plummeted. I thought of my mother's hands braiding my hair for the first day of school. I thought of the open sign flickering on in my shop before dawn, and I thought of Rowan telling me, "We're in this together," like it meant something. Somewhere below, a branch caught me. Not enough to stop the fall entirely, but enough to change it. My arm wrenched back, something popped and burned bright, and I screamed. I hit the snow hard, rolled, and finally stopped. The helicopter was a dot now shrinking toward the horizon. I lay there for a long time, I think. My shoulder throbbed, my leg felt wrong, and my face stung from where something had cut across my cheek. But I was breathing. I could still hear the wind in the trees, sharp and steady, like it was waiting to see if I'd get back up. I didn't cry. There wasn't room for that. I closed my eyes just for a second and let the cold move over me like a blanket. My breath came in short, ragged bursts. Everything hurt, but I knew I couldn't stay where I was. I reached for a broken branch nearby, thick enough to lean on, and dragged myself upright. My right leg wouldn't hold weight. My shoulder hung low, useless, but I moved anyway. The snow was deep, the wind slicing through the gaps in my coat. Every step sent fresh pain shooting through my side. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to keep going. Stopping wasn't an option, not if I wanted to live. I repeated it like a rhythm. One step, then another, then another. I don't know how long I walked. Could have been minutes, could have been hours. The sky shifted from silver to gray, the air colder than before. My fingers were stiff, my vision blurred. But then I saw it, half buried beneath snow, a cabin. Small, with dark wood siding and a narrow porch sagging under the weight of the snowpack. I dragged myself to the door, pounded on it with what strength I had left. No one answered. The knob turned easily. The door creaked open, and warm air met my face. I stepped inside and let the door fall shut behind me. My knees gave out. The floor caught me. The room smelled like old wood and smoke. A stove sat in one corner, a stack of firewood beside it. I pulled myself across the floor, found a dusty first aid kit on a shelf, and started wrapping what I could. My hands shook so badly I could barely tie the bandage around my shoulder. My leg I wrapped tighter using part of an old towel I found in a bin by the stove. I sat there for a while, thinking of Madison as a child, how she used to curl against me during thunderstorms, asking me not to leave. Her voice had been so small back then, and now she had tried to erase me like I'd never existed. A voice crackled through an old radio on the shelf. Static, then a clipped report. Woman presumed dead after helicopter fall near ridge. Body unrecovered. My name followed. They'd already declared me gone. No search, no waiting, just erased. I found an old coat by the door, thick and worn. I put it on, let the smell of pine and smoke settle around me. I checked the landline phone on the counter. It still worked. A weather app on a nearby screen showed a cold front moving over Aspen. Then came a bank alert. I recognized the number the insurance account Rowan and I had opened together. They weren't waiting. They'd filed the claim. The laugh that came out of me sounded like it belonged to someone else. I leaned on the counter holding tight until the dizziness passed. "They think I'm dead," I said out loud just to hear it. "Let them think that." I pulled on a pair of stiff old boots by the door, tied them as tight as I could, and braced myself with the branch. My ribs ached, my face burned, but I opened the door again. The cold hit hard, but it cleared my head. The sky was beginning to darken soft purple, bleeding across the clouds. I started walking one step, then another. Somewhere out there, Madison and Rowan were already starting their new life full of lies and money that was supposed to come with my death. I kept walking. By the time I saw the diner sign buzzing through the snow, my legs were shaking so badly I thought I might fall. I crossed the parking lot, pushed through the glass door, and stepped inside. The bell above the door rang. Conversation stopped. A teenage waitress came toward me, eyes wide. "Ma'am, do you need help?" I didn't answer. I walked past her, sat down in the booth closest to the payphone, and reached for the few coins I'd taken from the cabin. I dialed the number from memory. Vera answered on the second ring. "It's me," I said. There was a pause, then a breath. "Lauren, they said you were—" "I know what they said. I need help, quiet help. I'm on my way." I looked up at the TV mounted in the corner as she hung up. Rowan was on screen, standing behind a podium. Madison clung to his arm, her face hidden in his shoulder. Behind them, the logo of my company stood tall. I watched them weep for the cameras. Outside, snow began falling again, and I waited. The coffee in front of me had gone cold. I hadn't touched it since the waitress set it down, too focused on the muted news playing across the diner's small television. Rowan stood at a podium flanked by officials, his voice shaking as he asked the public for privacy during what he called a time of deep loss. Madison stood beside him, head bowed, shoulders trembling like she could barely hold herself upright. They looked like people in mourning, like family devastated by tragedy. I sat in that corner booth, coat still zipped fingers, stiff around a chipped ceramic mug, watching strangers believe what they saw on that screen. When the bell above the door finally rang, I looked up. Vera stepped inside her coat, still dusted with snow, eyes scanning the room until they landed on me. She crossed over, quickly slid into the booth across from me, and reached out without saying anything. I didn't move. Not yet. "I saw the news," she said quietly. I nodded once. "They filed the insurance claim already." Her lips pressed together, then she reached for her bag. "Let's look at the accounts." She opened her laptop right there at the table, fingers moving fast across the keys. The Wi-Fi was slow, but it loaded. She tapped through menus I hadn't seen in weeks. When the emergency fund dashboard came up, she paused. They moved everything she said, voice low. "Your signature's on all the transfers, but I know your signing style." This was copied. She turned the screen toward me. I read the note they had left attached to the transfer. "In case of disappearance, these funds will ensure business continuity." It was written like I had planned to vanish. Vera didn't say anything for a while. The sound of silverware and quiet conversation filled the space between us. Finally, she spoke again. "There's more. They've started whispering to the press, saying you were under stress, that you made comments about people watching you. They're laying a foundation." I leaned back in the booth, let my eyes close for just a second. I remembered Madison's voice in the helicopter. I remembered Rowan's stillness. They want the world to think I lost it. I said mostly to myself. Vera shut the laptop and looked at me carefully. "What do you want to do?" I didn't answer right away. I just reached for the paper napkin beside my mug, folded it once, then again, until it was a tight square in my hand. "We're going to take it back," I said quietly. "Every piece of it." We left the diner without speaking. Her car was parked under a flickering streetlight at the edge of the lot. The ride back to her place was silent, except for the hum of the tires against the snow-covered road. When we stepped inside, the heat in her apartment felt too warm against my face. She handed me a blanket and let me sit by the radiator while she made tea. Later that night, after I had showered and changed into borrowed clothes, we sat across from each other in her small kitchen. The walls were thin, and I could hear the pipes groan every time someone upstairs turned on the water. Vera set her phone on the table screen up and tapped out a message. "I know a lawyer," she said. "He's discreet. He can help us lock the accounts down, maybe even challenge the transfers." I nodded. "I want to see them. Both of them." Vera looked up from the screen. "You're not thinking about going public already, are you?" "I'm thinking about the funeral," I said. "I'm thinking about how they planned it without a body." The next morning, Vera handed me a black dress and a coat that fit well enough. I combed my hair back, kept my makeup simple. When I looked at myself in her hallway mirror, I didn't recognize the woman staring back. But I nodded once and turned away. We drove in silence. I watched the city blur past the rooftops dusted in snow, the sidewalks shoveled but slick, the trees bare except for a few stubborn leaves clinging near the base. As we neared the funeral home, I took a deep breath and held it. Outside the building, people gathered in small groups, their voices hushed, collars turned up against the cold. Vera parked a block away. I stepped out, my boots crunching the ice underfoot. I adjusted the collar of the coat and started walking. The doors of the funeral home opened with a soft push. The scent of lilies hit first faint cloying. I stepped into the entryway and saw my face staring back at me from a portrait near the sign-in table. In loving memory, it read beneath my name. A black ribbon stretched across the corner. I kept moving. Inside the chapel, people turned as I walked in. A few gasped. One woman dropped her program. Madison froze mid-sob, her tissue halfway to her cheek. Rowan stood at the front, hand on the podium, eyes locked on mine like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. I walked to the front of the room, heels clicking against the tile. I stopped just short of the casket closed, of course, and turned to face them. "I see you've already started," I said calmly. A ripple moved through the room. Whispering chairs shifting. Rowan stepped down from the podium. "Lauren, thank God you're alive," he said, reaching for me. I didn't step back, but I didn't take his hand either. "Save it." Madison came next. Her voice trembled just the right pitch for someone barely holding on. "We thought you ran," she said. "You've been under so much pressure, remember? You told us people were watching you. You were scared." I looked at her and didn't say anything. "You can lie to them," I said, finally nodding toward the guests. "But you can't lie to me." The room held still. Cameras clicked. Someone in the back asked, "Where have you been? Did you fake your death?" More questions followed. People leaned in. Security started to move toward the front, unsure if they should intervene. Rowan tried again. "Let's talk outside," he said, his voice low. "You need help." I looked him square in the face. "The only help I need is for you to let go of what isn't yours." Just then Vera slipped past the side door and moved toward me unnoticed by most. She brushed close and pressed something into my hand, a small flash drive. "When you're ready," she whispered. I held it tight, then turned and walked out the air thick with murmurs behind me. I didn't look back. We didn't talk much on the drive back. The flash drive stayed tucked in my coat pocket, warm from the heat vent under the dash. Vera kept one hand on the wheel, the other drumming lightly against her knee as the city passed by in streaks of headlight and snow. When we reached her apartment, she didn't ask if I was ready. She just unlocked the door, turned on the lamp by the window, and pulled her laptop from the shelf. We sat at the kitchen table while the computer powered on. Outside, the street was quiet, just the steady sound of wind brushing against the glass. Vera slid the drive into the USB port. The screen blinked once. Then a list of folders appeared. They were labeled by date, each one tagged with initials I recognized. Inside were files, PDFs, screenshots, email chains, scanned documents. Vera opened the first one, a transfer authorization form with my name at the bottom, my signature. She clicked on another, an internal memo stating that in the event of my mental deterioration, control of the company would shift to Rowan. My breath caught. Vera kept opening documents one after the other. They all said the same thing in different ways. They were preparing for my disappearance long before the helicopter. Then came the emails. Vera opened a thread between Madison and Rowan. There was no hesitation in their words, no coded language. One line from Rowan read, "She's unpredictable. This has to happen before she pulls everything down with her." Madison's reply came an hour later. "Understood. I'll handle it." The silence in the room deepened. Vera didn't say anything, just leaned back in her chair and stared at the screen. I scrolled further down the thread. One email had an attachment, a life insurance policy signed 2 weeks before the trip. Another included instructions for a bank account I didn't recognize. It wasn't just the money. It was the planning, the order, the time it must have taken to build this plan piece by piece while I sat beside them completely unaware. They covered every angle. Vera said, her voice low. "If you hadn't survived." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. I sat still for a while watching the folder titles flicker across the screen. Then I closed the laptop. The next morning we met with Vera's lawyer, an older man named Tom, who worked out of a modest downtown office filled with file cabinets and the smell of old carpet. He listened without interrupting, took notes quickly, and asked the right questions. "They're filing paperwork now," he said after we showed him the documents, "petitioning the court to freeze your assets, claiming you're not mentally sound enough to manage your own affairs. If they get approval, they'll gain full voting rights within the company." I sat still while he spoke. Vera handed him the flash drive. He said he'd start the injunction paperwork right away. Then he added something that made my jaw tighten. "They've already submitted affidavits, character statements, medical records." He looked up from his notes. "Some of those are included on this drive, but they'll argue you've always been fragile, that you've been under pressure for years." I nodded once. They knew I'd come back. We left the office a few minutes later. The cold outside hit hard, but I let it. We stopped at a cafe to warm up. Vera stepped away to make a call, and I sat alone with my tea watching the steam curl against the window. That's when the message came in. It was a text sent from an unknown number. I know what they did. Meet me. No name, no details. Just a location and a time. When Vera came back, I didn't show her the screen. I only told her I needed to follow up on something. She offered to come. I said no. I promised I'd call if anything seemed off. The address led me to a diner just past the bus terminal. One of those places that hadn't changed its wallpaper in 40 years. I walked in, took a booth near the back, and waited. 10 minutes later, a man stepped inside, mid-40s, limp in his step coat, zipped to his chin. He looked around, spotted me, and walked over. He took off his knit cap as he slid into the seat across from me. "Name's Aaron," he said. "I used to work for Madison. I didn't say anything. She used me," he continued. "I thought I mattered to her. But once she got what she needed, she cut me out. Same with Rowan. But before that, I saved copies of things, emails, reports, things they wouldn't want getting out. I studied him. His voice was steady, but his eyes kept moving. "Why are you coming forward now?" "Because I saw the news," he said. "And because I've seen what she does to people when no one's watching." He reached into his coat pocket and slid a small key across the table. "Storage unit couple blocks from here. Everything's inside. Files, backup drives, copies of everything I collected before I left. I've been sitting on it for months. Figured no one would believe me. But you've got a reason to burn it all down." I took the key, tucked it into my pocket. "You sure about this? I've already lost everything," he said. "Might as well help someone who hasn't." We left the diner together and walked a few blocks through falling snow. Vera was waiting in her car. When I got in, I handed her the key. We didn't speak as we pulled up to the storage unit. The door creaked as I slid it open. Inside were boxes stacked neatly labeled with dates and Madison's handwriting. Vera pulled one open. Her breath caught as she flipped through a folder. Fake medical records, pre-filled insurance forms, planning notes about how to frame the narrative. She looked at me. "This is enough to bury them." Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. It was a video call. The name on the screen was Madison. I answered, holding the phone at arm's length. She looked calm, hair done, lips painted. Her tone was light. "Well," she said, "look at you, digging around where you shouldn't be. You know where I am?" I asked. "Of course," she said. "You think you've won something. You think surviving makes you powerful. You've always been fragile, Lauren. Always." She leaned in closer to the camera. "Careful what you do next. If you go public, I will make sure everything you've ever hidden comes to light, every detail." The call ended. I lowered the phone. The storage unit felt colder now. Vera stepped beside me, hand on my shoulder. "She's scared," she said. I didn't answer right away. Then I looked up. Good. Vera and I spent the rest of that night going through every box in the storage unit. Aaron stayed close, mostly quiet, occasionally pointing out what folder belonged to what scheme. There were medical records doctored to show that I'd been placed on psychiatric watch diagnoses I'd never heard of, signed by doctors who didn't exist. One folder held notes written in Madison's hand, planning public statements about my mental decline. Another contained internal memos from our company's board, each one more carefully worded than the last, as if they were bracing for a shift in control. Toward the bottom of one box, Vera found a ledger listing every transfer from the company's primary account over the past 6 months. Dozens of them. Small enough to look normal on the surface, but taken together it was clear. They were bleeding the business out, preparing for a handoff that didn't include me. We loaded the folders into Vera's trunk and left just before sunrise. The cold made the road look washed out and empty, like it hadn't seen headlights in hours. Vera kept one hand on the wheel, the other gripping her phone. Aaron rode in the back head, resting against the window. None of us said much until we reached her apartment. Inside, I spread everything across the kitchen table: paper trails, forged documents, account numbers, appointment logs. Vera stood over my shoulder as I worked sorting the files into piles. When I paused, she pulled out her laptop and opened a secure folder she'd been keeping since the first time I called her from the diner. "We have enough," she said. "We can bring this to the board, the press, law enforcement if you want." I nodded slowly. "Not yet. I want to speak first." To who? To them. Later that day, we called an emergency board meeting through the company's legal counsel. I hadn't been seen publicly since the funeral, but that didn't stop Rowan from taking the call. He answered with a calm, measured tone, acting surprised when Vera and I joined the video chat. His camera stayed off. So did Madison's. But their lawyers were there, faces I recognized from meetings over the years, men who always smiled and said, "Whatever you need, Ms. Whitaker." I asked for a private room at the courthouse, something neutral, somewhere official but off the record. When we arrived, the others were already seated. Madison wore a dark blazer, her hair pinned back, face carefully composed. Rowan looked tired, but clean-shaven, like he'd taken just enough time to play the part. I walked in with Vera behind me, a folder under my arm and no makeup on. No one stood. I didn't sit either. I walked to the head of the table and opened the folder, laying out a clean row of papers, emails, signatures, transfer logs, internal memos. "This is what you did," I said. Rowan didn't move. Madison crossed her arms. "This isn't real," she said. "You've always been unstable. Everyone knows that." Her voice didn't waver, but her eyes darted toward Rowan. He didn't look back at her. "Then explain the handwriting," I said. "Explain the medical records with your email address listed under patient contact." Silence. I reached into my coat pocket and placed a small flash drive in the center of the table. "There's a video," I said. "You two talking about how easy it would be to make it look like an accident. About how I'd never see it coming." Rowan leaned forward. "That's not admissible. I'm not in court," I said. "Yet." The room stayed quiet. I could feel Vera standing just behind me, watching every reaction, taking note of every glance and twitch. Madison straightened her shoulders. "This is blackmail." "No," I said. "This is warning." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Rowan leaned back in his chair and said, "What do you want?" I looked him square in the eye. "I want my company. I want control returned. And I want every account unfrozen within 24 hours. Then I want you both gone, quietly, without trying to spin another story." Madison opened her mouth, but Vera stepped forward and placed another file on the table. "This was going to be released to the board today," Vera said, "along with a packet of digital files ready for every major shareholder and employee if anything happens to Lauren again." Madison's mouth closed. Rowan looked at me and gave a short nod. "We'll talk to our lawyers," he said. I stepped closer. "No more talking. You have until tomorrow." Back at Vera's, I sat by the window while she sent secured emails to the company's internal compliance team. One by one, the executives who had stayed silent began replying. Some denied knowing anything. Others asked for meetings. Vera told them all the same thing. "Wait, a statement is coming." I spent the rest of the day drafting it 3 pages long. Just facts. No emotion. No accusation beyond what was supported by documents and signatures. I added one line at the end that Vera suggested. "This statement is not about revenge. It is about restoration." The next morning, I watched from Vera's living room as it went live on the company's official channels. The reaction was immediate. Some employees reached out privately. A few directors resigned. Rowan's lawyer issued a public comment calling the statement unsubstantiated, but they didn't deny it. We had taken the first step. I stood by the window and watched the snow melt along the gutters. Down on the sidewalk, people moved past each other, bundled in coats, hurrying along like nothing had changed. But I had. I stood outside the courthouse just before noon, folder in hand, Vera at my side. Her car was parked a block away, trunk, locked documents stored in both paper and digital form. I had worn the same coat from the funeral, not for symbolism, just because it fit, and it was warm. My breath clouded the air as we crossed the street, the sound of traffic dulled by fresh snow. Inside, the security guard gave me a long look, then waved us through. We didn't need a courtroom. We had a private conference room arranged earlier by my attorney and confirmed by the judge's clerk. No trial. Not yet. Just a gathering, Rowan Madison, their legal team, 2 board representatives, and one of the company's compliance officers. Enough to witness what needed to be said. I stepped into the room first. The door clicked shut behind me. They were already seated, eyes narrowing when I entered. Rowan looked at the table. Madison didn't look away. I placed the folder in the center and stayed standing. "I brought copies," I said. "Same files we released last night. You've seen them by now." No one responded. I opened the folder and spread the pages out. Statements from employees, falsified psychiatric evaluations, bank transfers bearing my forged signature. Then I reached for the last piece, the flash drive. "This is from the night before the helicopter trip," I said. "You're in it, both of you. I'd prefer not to play it here. But I will if I have to." Rowan cleared his throat. "You've made your point. We've begun the process of restoring your access. Our attorneys are reviewing," I cut him off. "The company will issue a correction by end of day, full reinstatement, formal apology to shareholders, and your resignation's effective immediately." Madison leaned back. "You can't make demands, not in this setting." I looked at her and said nothing. Instead, Vera stepped forward. She pulled her phone from her coat pocket and tapped a few buttons. "Check your inbox," she said. "You'll find links to every board member, our statement, and the press kit. If the resignations don't go through, we're filing a civil suit tomorrow. If the board doesn't vote to reappoint Lauren as CEO by Friday, we go public with the video." Madison's jaw clenched, but she said nothing. Rowan finally stood. "You're not leaving anything on the table, are you?" "No," I said. "Nothing." We left the room without shaking hands. Back in Vera's apartment, we waited. The sky outside dimmed. My phone buzzed once email from the board confirming receipt of our terms. Another buzz, resignations filed. Then a third company statement scheduled for 5 p.m. At 4:58, Vera angled the portable projector against the side of the courthouse wall. We stood near the base of the steps, just out of view. Cameras gathered, voices murmured, phones raised. When the hour turned, we hit play. It was a short clip. Less than a minute. Madison's voice laughing. Rowan beside her, glass in hand. "She never saw it coming," she said. "All it took was a little push. Then Rowan easy money. And we don't even have to wait for a body." The crowd reacted slowly, soft gasps at first, then murmurs that grew louder. A reporter near the front stepped forward, microphone raised. "Lauren, is this real?" I stepped into the light. "It's real." Phones buzzed. Questions flew. One person shouted, "Are they under arrest?" I didn't answer. Vera held up a statement printed on letterhead sealed with the board's approval. "As of today," she said, "Lauren Whitaker has been reinstated as Chief Executive Officer. Ms. Whitaker will also be pursuing legal action independent of the company's position." That part wasn't planned, but it landed the way it needed to. We left through the side entrance. News vans followed, but not many. Most were still watching the clip on loop, playing it frame by frame. Back at Vera's, I sat down on the couch and closed my eyes. I could still hear Madison's voice in my head, still feel the cold from that mountaintop. But something had shifted. The silence in the room wasn't heavy anymore. It felt like the kind of quiet that comes after a storm. Vera stepped into the room and sat beside me. "They'll fight back," she said. I nodded. "Let them." She handed me a second folder. "We need to file for permanent control. Not just your seat on the board, the whole thing. Ownership Accounts Authority." I opened the folder and picked up the pen. "I'm ready." We filed the motion for full corporate control on a Thursday morning. By the end of the day, the news was everywhere, front pages. Financial outlets push alerts on people's phones. The video had been authenticated. The board issued a follow-up confirming their cooperation. Rowan and Madison's resignations had already been finalized, but now, with the legal filings made public, the pressure shifted fast. That weekend, I returned to the office for the first time since the memorial. My name was already back on the glass door. Vera met me in the lobby. She handed me a key card and walked me up herself. The elevator ride was quiet. When we reached the executive floor, we found a stack of letters waiting, some from former colleagues, some from employees I'd never spoken to directly. Most just said, "Welcome back." On Monday, I held an internal town hall meeting in the main conference room. We live-streamed it to all employees. No cameras from the outside, just me and a stack of notes. I didn't speak about betrayal. I spoke about rebuilding, about what we'd survived, about who had helped hold the line when things felt lost. I thanked them, and I named them. Vera, the compliance officer who flagged the first signature. The junior accountant who printed a copy of the ledger before it disappeared from the servers. Even Aaron, his name came last, but I made sure it stayed on the screen the longest. After the broadcast, Vera and I reviewed the next steps. Asset control was underway. All major contracts were being reevaluated. Personal accounts that had been drained by Madison and Rowan were now under formal investigation. Every line of financial damage we could verify was being added to a criminal referral. That afternoon, the district attorney's office called. A grand jury was being formed. Rowan was the first to respond. His lawyer issued a public statement denying wrongdoing, but the tone had changed. Less confident, more cautious. By Thursday, a warrant was filed for misappropriation of corporate funds. 2 days later, another for conspiracy to commit fraud. Madison kept quiet. No interviews, no social media. She had vanished from the public view, but not from our radar. Vera tracked a series of wire transfers, leaving a trust under Madison's name. We froze them before they cleared. On Friday, Rowan was arrested. No cuffs, no flashing lights, just a quiet detainment at his lawyer's office. The photo made its way around the press. Rowan in a blazer, eyes lowered, no tie. That night, Vera and I stood outside the courthouse again. No projector this time, no crowd, just the two of us. We watched the lights glow from the upper floors, watched the snow start to gather in the corners of the steps. "You did it," Vera said. I looked at her. We did. There were still hearings ahead, depositions, more meetings with regulators, but the weight of silence had lifted. The truth was now part of the public record. The next morning I received a letter from Aaron, handwritten, no return address. He wrote that he'd stayed in town away from the press, away from Madison. He said he hadn't known how far it had gone, that when it started he thought they were just shutting me out, never imagined it would go further. I was weak, he wrote, but I didn't want you to disappear. I didn't know what they were capable of. I know you'll never forgive me. I just wanted you to know I didn't stay silent because I hated you. I stayed silent because I thought you'd already given up. I folded the letter and placed it in my desk drawer. I didn't write back. That afternoon, I met with the lead prosecutor. We discussed trial dates, testimonies, how much evidence I'd be asked to present. Vera handled most of the logistics. I answered what I could. At the end of the meeting, the prosecutor asked if I'd like to read a statement during sentencing if it came to that. "I'll think about it," I said. Back at the office, a box was waiting at reception. No name, no label, inside a photo album. Old pictures, me, Madison, our parents. Birthday parties, Christmas mornings, a trip to the lake I barely remembered. At the back of the album was a picture I hadn't seen before. My father smiling. I was maybe 6, sitting on his lap, pointing at something off camera. On the back, written in faded ink, were the words, "She sees everything." I set the album aside. That evening I stayed in my office after everyone had gone home. I watched the snow fall from the window, steady and silent. Somewhere beneath it all, the old world was still there, just buried, waiting. It's been almost 2 years now. The trial ended in late spring. Rowan was sentenced to 9 years without parole. Madison took a plea less time, but full forfeiture of everything she'd stolen. There was no apology, not in court, not afterward. She left the building without looking at me, and I didn't follow. The company is stable again. Vera stayed on as COO, and we've shifted toward mentorship and sustainable design, something that always mattered to me, but never quite fit the old model. Some of our clients dropped off early on, but the ones who remained brought others. We grew slowly, and this time on my terms. I sold the Aspen house, gave away most of what was inside. That life, those polished rooms and framed photos, felt like a version of myself I didn't need to keep. I moved back to Nebraska for a little while, stayed in the same house where I grew up, helped my mother pack the last of her things before she moved to Arizona. She's quieter now. We both are. We talk more in action than in words. I rebuilt the porch swing she used to sit on, fixed the loose floorboard near the front door. It creaked just like I remembered. Some evenings I'd walk the gravel road past the fields and think about all the ways silence can live inside people. How long things can go unspoken without disappearing. How truth waits sometimes for years until someone's ready to carry it out into the light. I don't see Madison. I don't hear from Rowan. Aaron sent one last letter before the sentencing and hasn't written since. I haven't gone looking. What came back to me, my name, my place, my voice, was never really lost. Just buried like everything else under that snow. When I stood in that clearing after they left me behind, I didn't feel rage. I felt quiet, like I finally saw who I was without them. Sometimes justice doesn't come in the form of revenge or headlines. Sometimes it's just a slow, steady return to yourself. A door reopened. A name spoken with full weight. A life you no longer have to defend. And that's where I'll leave this. If you're still listening, thank you. And if any part of this reminded you of a moment where you stood back up after being left behind, you're not alone. Feel free to share your story in the comments. I'll be there reading. And if this resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe. There's more to come.